Now you guys will become combative, you will train, you will improve yourself. Plus 36 in Asia, minus 12 in Ukraine. We neutralized 30 occupiers a day. They financed the army of the Russian Federation for $5 million. They were fed up with Russian propaganda. We either fight to the positive end or suck and die. I'm a reserve lieutenant colonel, served 16 years in the UK Royal Marines. Okay, now seriously. My call sign is Otche. I served in a platoon of unmanned aerial systems. Our main task is to fly, observe, throw grenades. Do both reconnaissance and enemy destruction, and we're doing everything we can do, really. An adjustment for other branches of the military, for example, too. It's necessary to understand what was and what is in the field of intelligence. For example, in 2014, our intelligence crawled to the enemy's position and at incredible risk received some partial information. Now they don't have to. Now that's what we are for. We can fly our bird 100, 200, 500 meters, a kilometer away from the front line, fly and see the situation, what's happening there with the occupiers. That is, we receive the maximum possible useful information without losing personnel. I joined the Volunteer Combat Battalion in 2014, defended our country near the Donetsk airport in the village of Pisky. Ukrainians have definitely heard this name. I get 2 contusions there, went to rehabilitation. Then I searched for myself for a long time, engaged in public activities, even some political activities. In 2016 I went to serve again. Like a fool, I went on conscription in Odessa. There was a continuous drill. And just then our brigade was recruiting motivated people. The recruiters told us, that's it, you guys will be combative, you will train, you will improve yourself. I liked it. Obviously it's better to be a warrior than a cleaner and a watchman. I joined this team and began to improve myself. Firstly, I was a soldier. Then I went through a junior command sergeant course, that's for a unit commander position, then a sergeant course to become a platoon or company chief sergeant. Well, now I'm already an officer, a crew commander of unmanned aircraft complexes. I resigned in 2019, went traveling around the world, visited almost all of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. I had a great job in Cambodia. It's honestly the coolest job I ever had, aside from what I'm doing now. I lived my life there. I have a beautiful wife, a cat. I earned quite a good money, and at the same time I was doing what I liked. There I worked in a nature protection organization, rescuing animals, fighting against illegal logging, etc. But when the Great War began, it's obvious that the choice was to go to Ukraine and defend our country. Without thinking for a long time, I immediately flew here, although it was very difficult because it was still the post-COVID period. When I finally arrived to hometown, I stayed at home for 2 days to adapt at least a little. It's necessary to understand that in Asia it was then plus 36, in Ukraine minus 12. I arrived at the airport in Warsaw in a sweater. I go outside and was shocked because it was really very cold. I got to my hometown and then we went to Kyiv by bus. In the brigade, everyone who knew me greeted me warmly. I actually had a lot of options to choose, but coming to a place where I know people, have friends, was probably the right decision. Moreover, then I got to the unit in which I am now, I realized that I can bring a high coefficient of useful action. It's very important for me. Plus, the brigade needed people because most of the personnel were already fighting in the east of Ukraine. At first, we participated in operations in the Kyiv region, went to Huta-Mezhihirska. I took part only in one combat operation in defense of capital, because when I arrived I had a relapse of malaria and in fact I was immediately hospitalized. After that we were in Kyiv for some time. After the Russian army was expelled from there, sitting there was not interesting to me. Of course I rushed to the east, because it's necessary to win and for this to participate in this war. That's how I got to Donetsk region again, to an operation in Zaitsevo. Then there was the Kharkiv counteroffensive, the liberation of settlements, Bakhmut. I participated in all these movements, and I'm very satisfied because it was interesting and extremely dangerous. Everyone already knows the phrase that Russians like to shout when drunk: Russians don't leave their own behind. It's perfectly visible from the drone that almost always 100% the Russians abandon theirs. For example, there is a wounded person, we see him and a drone flies up there. Even if it's 2-3 meters from the wounded person to the dugout and somebody can really pull him there with one jerk, they don't do it. Others simply run away like mice. And at this time you can understand and see the desperation of this abandoned person, as if he was dissatisfied with the course of the war. It's also interesting how quickly they dance when the drone throws something. We neutralized a large number of invaders, especially if we take into account the adjustment. When we were in Bakhmut and there was no deficit of ammunition, we worked hard. It happened that 30 invaders were minus a day. How it was? We went to a mission, see a group of Russians, begin to adjust the artillery, and no more enemy group. And there could be 3 or 4 such groups a day. We could work for a month or 2 every day. I am more than sure that we neutralized more than a platoon of invaders with grenades from drones. We had a group of 10 people holding the left flank of the entire settlement, and the enemy simply couldn't think that there were 10 people who not only didn't run away, but destroyed the offensive. If they really knew that there were only 10 of us, they would storm again and again. But they, after only one try, continued to bypass that area. They were simply afraid of our guys, because they thought that there were some kind of special forces. One of the biggest tank attacks I have ever seen took place near Tonenka in the Avdiivka direction. 36 tanks and 12 infantry fighting vehicles were moving towards the positions of our soldiers. This is a huge amount of infantry and a huge amount of equipment. Just imagine, our guys destroyed this column. The Russians simply couldn't understand what was happening. It must be said that we really achieved very good results with the minimum amount of ammunition and the absence of advantages in weapons. No matter what happens, we don't run away, we don't fold our hands, and we don't shout, "That's all, we give everything up." Maybe it's some kind of Cossack spirit. We already understand that Ukrainians are not nomadic sheep herders. We are truly a passionate nation, sufficiently warrior. We can defend our land, and we show it. I have never seen better soldiers in the world than Ukrainian soldiers. We have only 2 options: we either fight to the end or suck and die. We need to talk about both negative and positive things. Don't lie to ourselves, but don't fall into self-flagellation either. I am not saying that everything is fine with us. Yes, we have a shortage of ammunition. There are problems in various areas, but with what we have, we give a very high result, and the Russians come up with hundreds of lies, because cannot admit to the population how we put them down. In my opinion, the absence of Russian influence is even much more important than territorial aspects. When someone says that culture has nothing to do with politics, it speaks to the level of education in the society. I recently learned that only Ukrainian citizens who watched Russian content on YouTube actually financed the army of the Russian Federation for about $. And there are 400 Lancet unmanned aerial vehicles flying over our territory. Therefore, to be an adequate person, it's important to understand that the enemy is absolutely in everything Russian and in Russian culture as well. Right now, we need people, we need reinforcements so that we can fight back the enemy even better. I understand that after more than 2 years of war, I have a bad moral and psychological state. I can no longer empathize with the enemy. I'm 28 years old. I still want to travel the world, have fun, develop, improve myself, and live together with my wife, maybe with future children, and so on. It works in all jobs that because of the routine for a maximum of 3 years you can be motivated for something new, for maximum efforts. And if people start having problems because of ordinary stresses, imagine what kind of stresses we have. Obviously, this is very, very difficult. will resist the occupiers, and it's actually very motivating when you give good results and when you understand that you're really useful. I understand that my parents, my sister, my family and friends who are behind me, they're relatively safe. If I know and understand that they can live their lives, that's worthy for me, and it's worth defending my country.